In the world of bodybuilding, no title is held in higher esteem than the Mr. Olympia. It takes a combination of elite genetics, hard work, dedication, and precision to stand a chance of having your hand raised. Of those who have graced the Olympia stage, only 19 men have earned the right to call themselves Mr. Olympia. Over the next few weeks, I will outline every single Mr. Olympia contest, as well as the cash prize the victor earned for their efforts. This video will cover every Mr. Olympia contest from the 1960s. Are you ready? Held on September 18th at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, New York, the inaugural Mr. Olympia contest has since become legendary. Despite gaining an invitation, Steve Reeves and Reg Park did not attend nor compete in the contest. As such, the Olympia stage was graced by only 3 men: Americans Larry Scott and Harold Poole, and Barbados-born Earl Maynard. As Poole and Maynard entered the spotlight, they were each met with overwhelming applause. However, before Larry Scott had even appeared, the crowd began chanting, "We want Scott! We want Scott!" And Scott they got. Onlookers of the contest have since reminisced about Scott's platinum blonde hair and movie star good looks. Most notable, however, were his mind-blowing arms and shoulders. The crowd went absolutely ballistic when Scott struck each pose, especially his front double biceps. Late bodybuilding historian Peter McGuff explained that this could only be compared to a Beatles concert.
And people still say, Larry's effect on the audience, they've never witnessed anything like it. And he posed and the audience went nuts. They were standing on the chairs, jumping up and down, and people that were there, I wasn't there, say it was like Beatlemania.
Larry Scott would of course win the contest, becoming the first ever Mr. Olympia champion. With the promise of a $1,000 gift for the victor, Scott was awarded an oversized red crown. Based on the smile on his face, I can't imagine Larry minded much. After the show, the fans in attendance flooded into the streets, surrounding the academy in a massive crowd. As each contestant emerged from the theatre, they were met with equal applause and congratulations. Some were even hoisted onto the shoulders of fans, who proudly paraded them through the streets. In 1966, onlookers were blessed to witness Chet Yorton win Mr. America, Dave Draper win Mr. Universe, and Sergio Oliva win Mr. World, as well as attend the Mr. Olympia, all with the same ticket. Like last year, 1966 was Beatlemania incarnate. After the other 3 athletes had taken and left the stage, Larry Scott himself was keenly anticipated by the crowd. The Master of Ceremonies, Bud Parker, announced, "Now defending his Mr. Olympia title from California, Larry." But before he was able to squeeze out the Scott, he was drowned out. Much like in 1965. Wanting to please the crowd, Scott hit pose after pose. Yet eventually he finished and walked off. Yet left the audience still wanting more. For those in attendance, it was clear that he would win his second Mr. Olympia championship. After each athlete had conducted their individual posing, an intermission was called to allow the judges to make their decision. Regardless, this decision did not come easy, as they had to work at it for 20 minutes. Eventually, however, the announcement was made. Mr. Olympia for 1966 was once again Larry Scott. Larry had once again bested Harold Poole, as well as Chuck Sipes and the Olympia debutante, Sergio Oliva. Joe Weider presented Larry with his commemorative silver plate, lined with $1,000 in cash. After receiving his prizes for emerging victorious, Scott was also handed the microphone. Larry thanked his fans for their support and adulation, and officially announced his retirement from bodybuilding.
After I was given the trophy, the second Olympia, I said, "I want you to appreciate their loyalty and their adulation and everything." And that's what I told them. I told them from my heart. It was a great honor. I've done something for a little Pocatello kid to get this kind of an honor, and I really appreciated them. But tonight is my last contest.
Scott stated that he was planning on retiring regardless, but the Mr. World of that year was rising fast, and that he timed it perfectly. Scott's retirement also allowed budding Olympia champions to walk through an open door. The only question was who. After winning the 1967 Mr America and Mr World competitions respectively earlier that night, Don Howarth and Rick Wayne had both just earned their place on the Olympia stage. However, both men declined. With the retirement of Larry Scott the year prior, the remaining 3 men from last year's roster returned: Oliva, Poole and Sipes. And they were joined by one newcomer, Dave Draper. Draper was the first to grace the stage, yet was not up to scratch due to his commitments in Hollywood. Next on stage was a much improved Sipes, who surprised the attendees in mass. But this was quickly forgotten when Oliva paced out thereafter. With a mind-blowing physique and beautiful posing in equal measure, those in attendance were left speechless at the mere sight of Sergio. Judge Dick Tyler wrote that the words to describe Oliva haven't been invented yet. Yet, Bill Dobbins tries his best to do so. Last on stage was Poole, who, after the cheers for Oliva had died down, was still met warmly. However, when he hit his trademark most muscular pose, they went absolutely ballistic. When all was said and done, Sergio would win his first Olympia championship and became the second to ever do it. Prior to researching for this video, I was blissfully unaware that this may have potentially been one of the closest decisions in Olympia history. Here is an excerpt from Dick Tyler in Muscle Builder, which will provide you with an accurate and unique inside perspective. Thus ended the Olympia contest for the audience, but the job of the judges was just beginning. We went through the orchestra pit to the level under the stage for our balloting. I voted for Oliva, but to my surprise, Poole pulled most of the votes. We argued and balloted and argued and balloted while the audience waited. John Twitchell came down to see what we had decided. He was told that Poole was the winner. He nodded and started upstairs when someone suggested that we have just one more look at them all together. Twitchell was literally a step away from Parker with the decision when he was caught. Except for a step and a voice, Poole would have been Mr Olympia. The curtains were closed and the contestants mounted the platform backstage, while the judges once again went about the task of trying to decide who was Mr Olympia for 1967. We went into a side room and re-balloted with the promise that this was the final vote. This time Oliva emerged the winner in one of the closest contests I've ever seen. In 1968, like in previous years, ticket holders were also treated to 2 other shows prior to the Olympia. The IFBB Mr America overall was won by Frank Zane, who also won the Best Legs trophy, while the Mr World overall was secured by a returning Olympian, Qyxz Sipes. However, as the main event rolled around, it was revealed to the crowd that the contest would not actually, be contended, as there would only be one man to grace the stage that night. The previous year, Poole's promotion to general manager of a New York business negatively impacted his training schedule. Dave Draper's training was heavily impacted by a demanding Hollywood schedule and guest appearances to promote his films. Qyxz Sipes had recently won the Mr World contest and also performed strongman stunts that same evening. As a result, he was wiped. This came at the advice of Joe Weider, who recommended that he wait to the following year. Lastly, despite advising the Weeders that he would compete, Arnold Schwarzenegger had decided to enter the Pro Mr Universe in London, England, which was held on the very same day. As such, Sergio Oliva would once again claim the Mr Olympia Championship, this time by default. As such, this is perhaps his least impressive victory. This occurrence would only be repeated once in 1971. Despite the lack of competition and his defaulted victory, there is no denying that Sergio was much improved and that no one, simply no one, could have competed against him anyway. Sergio had earned the bodybuilding moniker of the Myth for very good reason. On September 13th, 1969, in the 5th Mr Olympia contest, the last of the decade, history was made again. Not only would Frank Zane defeat Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Mr. Universe contest, Arnold would once again be defeated on the stage that night. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Earlier, Arnold had breezed through the universe and was looking to secure the Olympia crown. On the Olympia stage, Arnold's posing was strong, which turned the crowd somewhat in his favour. They cheered especially loudly when he hit his most muscular, after which he confidently walked off stage. After the cheers for Arnold slowly died down, the cheers of anticipation for Sergio slowly grew more deafening. Oliva continued to make the crowd wait, but when the moment finally came and Sergio graced the stage, he blew the roof off. Despite this reaction, the judges couldn't decide and called both men back out. They went pose for minutes, which may well be the first documented example of this occurring at the contest. Despite a strong showing from Arnold, he did not quite have what it took to topple the king. Yet, anyway, when all was said and done, Sergio Oliva had once again claimed the Mr. Olympia title. When Oliva's name was called as the victor, Arnold congratulated and embraced him immediately, showing great sportsmanship. Sergio didn't know it yet, but he actually joined the "We are the only 3 bodybuilders who defeated Arnold Schwarzenegger" club. I've already stated that Frank Zane was 1. Comment below if you know the 3rd. This photo shows Arnold side-eyeing Joe Weider, perhaps thinking this title will be his the following year. For now, the bitter taste of defeat was fresh in his mouth, but this taste didn't last long.